One Piece has a ton of arcs. 32 canon arcs fully completed, as well as one being the G8 in the anime that is non-canon, and then we've also got Elbaf going on currently, which is number 33, and who knows how much longer One Piece is going to go on. I imagine we have at least a handful of arcs left to go. Some arcs stand at the pinnacle of what can be delivered in the anime and manga mediums, others Oda leaves a bit more to be desired. Let's tier list all of the arcs within One Piece. Alright, I figured the only way to do this is to go in story order, so obviously we start with Romance Dawn. Now, I put Romance Dawn in the A tier. I can hear B tier as well, as it's pretty simple beginnings of the story. We get to meet Luffy, we get to meet Zoro, we get to meet Nami. What puts it in the A tier for me is that it immediately shows us what the story of One Piece is going to be about. Happy-go-lucky Rubber Boy is going to show up to places with oppression and free the people there from that oppression. This is set out immediately with the Marines, with Axe-Hand Morgan and Helmeppo, and Luffy comes in and solves that problem because he's that guy. But the lessons from that aspect of the story stick with us through the rest of One Piece, that the world government is truly the villain of this story, and that their violence arm, being the Marines, is always there at the epicenter of the problems because the world government uses them to exert their force, and then on a smaller scale, the power from the Marines always goes to their heads. It always shows that these Marines will steal any modicum of power that they possibly can in order to exert more force on the people around them. I'm going to go ahead and throw Orangetown into C tier. Hot take, I'm not the biggest Buggy fan. I think he's hilarious and he's funny, but like I have no attachment to him whatsoever. He's an early story villain within One Piece, and it is a good way to show that the problem cannot always be solved in the way that you would think so going into this world. Yeah, pirates use guns and they use swords and they slash each other and they shoot at each other and they're fighting each other all of the time, but a character like Buggy shows you that even this absolute goofball can have some impact because you basically can't kill him. He divides up and he's able to thwart Luffy in multiple different ways, puts him in a cage, but ultimately Orangetown is pretty short and leads into a bit of a better arc in my opinion. Syrup Village will be our first B tier arc within the story of One Piece. It doesn't necessarily have the strongest story. Usopp has a good story for one of the Straw Hats, but if you were going to tier list the Straw Hat backstories, he's probably going to be dead last. The kid that nobody believes in, the guy that's always crying wolf, his dad is off fighting with Shanks. But he is an endearing member of the Straw Hat crew. He is our analog. He is our avatar. He is a normal person who needed friends, who wanted to be recognized, but didn't know how to go out and get it on his own. He didn't know how to be a brave warrior, and to have three brave warriors, being Luffy, Zoro, and Nami, show up and bring him along on their journey is a great way to move that story into the fold of One Piece and the Straw Hat Pirates. And we also get the Going Merry, but I have a personal reason that I actually really still love Syrup Village to this day. When my wife and I were first watching One Piece, she started doing the thing that Kuro does where he lifts his glasses with the bottom of his hand or like with the palm of his hand because he has the blades. And I was just looking for any inclination that my wife was enjoying the experience of One Piece in the same way that I was, and this was like a fun tell that it was really resonating with her and impacting with her. So I'll always have a bit of a soft spot for Syrup Village, even though it's not the strongest even in its kind of like pre-time skip format. The Baratie, on the other hand, I would say is probably going to be a lower end A tier arc within One Piece. Introduction of Sanji, introduction of Mihawk, getting to meet Don Krieg, and learning a bit about what the Grand Line is actually like. How pirates that look and what we perceive as strong as that point in the story being basically chased out of the Grand Line, setting up that fear as to what the crew is going to be getting into once they go down Reverse Mountain. It's a great way to establish that point, but what I love the most about Baratie is that it revolves around cooking, and it revolves around the understanding that everybody deserves to eat. Even your enemies deserve a plate, and that the kitchen should be a very, like, sanctimonious place. Like, this is somewhere where people are fed, and food is so incredibly important, and the love that you can put into it can be translated and felt so easily. And that's the best part about Sanji's character, is his need to feed others, even if as the story has gone on, we've lost quite a bit of that. But ultimately, this early portion of the story culminates in one of the greatest arcs in all of anime and manga, especially one that can like really grip you into the story, that being Arlong Park, our very first S tier ranking. I have Arlong Park so high because it's one of these things where people say, just get to episode 45, just get through Arlong Park, get to the walk at Arlong Park, get to Nami's backstory, get to the village and how they all want to defend her and they know what's going on, but she's too proud to actually tell them the truth, even if they already know it. Arlong's motivations being set up at this point in the story so we can wrap back into them in Fishman Island. Luffy being a goofball. The other characters having to set out and actually coordinate and fight other characters, being the other Fishman with Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp. It establishes itself as what this story is truly going to do. It's going to start, and we're going to ramp up into what is the most important moment in each saga. This all led to Nami running away, and then going back to Arlong Park, and then the crew chasing her there because Luffy knows something is wrong, and he's willing to help her. The moment where she requests help from Luffy, and he gives her his hat, it's all so incredible, and it's what truly locks people into One Piece. We do get an early version of Oda is going to sideline Luffy in order to tell the rest of the stories for everybody else within the arc. We see this even in current day where he like runs out of energy because he needs food. He's even like gone on record and talked about how he has to sideline Luffy or he's going to solve all the problems in the arc too quickly. So this is the first time we really see that, and I think it's actually better for Luffy's character here. It gets kind of annoying when it's the food aspect later on in the story, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Next, we're gonna jump over to Logtown, and I'm gonna go ahead and put this above Orangetown in C tier. I kind of think of Logtown as like the first lore piece arc, the first aspect where we're gonna see a good bit of information, but not too much really happens. We meet Dragon, we meet Smoker, we understand that this is the place that Goldie Roger was from and where he was executed. We get to see that execution stage, we get to see Buggy at the top of it, we get to see Dragon use his powers, we get to see Sea Prism Stone, and then we're off, we're running away. It leaves us an inclination that we should be apprehensive of Logia users, that this is a problem we are going to be running into as the story progresses, and how Luffy has to overcome those different challenges really culminates in Alabasta, but this is where that starts. Reverse Mountain we're going to go ahead and put in C tier, above Logtown. I absolutely love Laboon. This is a pretty short portion of the story, so it doesn't have too much impact overall. What's nice is this is the open-endedness of Oda's writing, that Laboon has some kind of backstory with a crew that sailed through the Grand Line that he has not seen in however many years, and Crocus was a part of the Goldie Roger crew, and that this is our introduction to the Grand Line. Like, we get swallowed up by a whale, and then by the end of the arc, Luffy is fighting Laboon because Laboon just needs a little rough up every once in a while. It's a great arc in and of itself. It just doesn't do too much. It's very short and very quick, and we move right through it. But I absolutely love the characters, the two of them, that we meet in that moment. Actually, we're going to go ahead and put that at the bottom of B tier. We're going to put that at the bottom of B tier. I talked myself into it. Whiskey Peak, this is what we'll put at the top of C tier. We meet Mr. Booger Flicker. We meet Vivi before she has revealed that she is actually the princess to Alabasta. We get the understanding that we are about to move into the next stage of arcs, right? We're going to culminate all of this within Alabasta. But this is where it all starts. We meet the main villain crew. Zoro wipes out 100 of them because I feel like Oda had to show that Zoro is absolutely no slouch at this point in the story, and that he is a bit off his rocker in a way that he'll just fight anybody at this point, especially after losing to Mihawk. But ultimately, this is the start of the rise. Like, we're going uphill, but it's pretty short. Little Garden is absolutely fantastic because we get to meet Dory and Brogy. We will put that in B tier. I'm probably going to put that above Reverse Mountain. Again, another part where Oda gets to leave something super open-ended so that eventually we can come back around to the Giants, but we have the promise of their homeworld being Elbaf, the place that warriors hail from, and Luffy and Usopp have the dream of going there one day, and Luffy, by the time he shows up, is so worthy to be there, and Usopp's tale of who he is has culminated so highly, and the friends he's made along the way have reinforced this, I'm meant to be here. So looking back on Little Garden, it's absolutely fantastic, and the story of Dory and Brogy just fighting for 100 years, going back and forth with each other constantly because that's just what giants do. Dinosaurs running around, and then eventually Baroque Works showing up and mucking up the works is a really great little arc within One Piece. Again, we're climbing up the hill. And then Drum Island, I'm going to go ahead and put in A tier. I'm actually going to put it above Romance Dawn. I don't know. All my justification I'm going to use here is that look at my profile picture. Not only is this a great representation of Oda lacing in some cultural critique and societal critique within the story about who is and is not deserving of healthcare and living their life like in a way that is fulfilling for them, but also we get absolutely incredible moments, right? Heartbreaking moments of Chopper eating the human fruit, which he does not give a model name to. Again, open-endedness leading to retcons, but it's a good way to write his story. Absolutely heartbreaking. And then the desire to be the panacea, the thing that can cure all diseases, and Chopper's ultimate goal being that. And then Luffy climbing up that mountain, climbing up the pillar in Drum Island in the freezing cold with his bare hands bleeding from his knuckles while he's holding someone with his mouth and over his shoulder. It's one of those moments where when you're watching One Piece, you're like, I love Luffy, right? He's a funny character and he shows up in big moments. And then even when it's not a fight, even when it's not just facing down the strongest enemy on that island, I dare I'd say that moment is more ballsy, is more hype, is more peak, is more whatever adjective you want to throw onto it that is synonymous with getting my blood pressure up because I am so absolutely enamored by what this kid can do. That moment is so emblematic of who Luffy is. And then the arc resolving itself with them being courageous and Luffy taking off with Chopper and not taking no for an answer and joking about how he's going to eat him and moving on to what is essentially the culmination of all of this that we have like gathered up so far with Baroque Works and going through Little Garden and the challenges that they've run into, but needing a doctor and running into the multiple different like climates that you can get into when it comes to the Grand Line. So going from Snow Island over to Desert Island, we have the top of A tier, and what will probably be the top of A tier by the time we're done with this, Alabasta. This is, again, the culmination of so many things that we learned, right? In Logtown, we see what it's like to go up against a Logia, and Luffy tries over and over again to defeat Crocodile, but he loses over and over again to the point that like he's basically dying. We get one of the best transformations being Water Luffy, one of my favorites, and we see his like indomitable human spirit, but we also get to see the critique of what is going on that island and wrapping in the world government as well as like a critique of what capitalism like can create in people. You have a dog with its tail tucked between its legs being Crocodile after getting absolutely whooped by Whitebeard is now preying on an island that does not have the means to defend itself from somebody like him, basically overthrowing it so that he can create Las Vegas on a raft, is stealing all of their water, is literally killing people day by day through drought and famine, but all in the intention of enriching himself. But the problem is, the real problem is that's evil and villainry in and of itself. The problem is the world government is essentially sanctioning this because he is a warlord. The world government has co-signed this, that might makes right, that it is okay to do something like this, and they'll even send Marines to assist you, and they'll cover it up with propaganda and lies when it's all done, acting like they weren't there in order to try and help facilitate this, and believed in the propaganda against Cobra, and were trying to hunt down Vivi, and it's a phenomenal arc. This is the very beginning of maybe Oda's most annoying writing trope, which is fake out deaths. And Pell is by far the most annoying example. Pell sets up the scenario that nobody dies in One Piece. So when it happens later in One Piece, when like Ashura Doji dies in Wano, you don't even believe it when it happens, and like they have like a grave, and you're like, really? Like that's what took him out? Pell flies off with the biggest bomb we see in One Piece for until, I don't know, Marineford at least? Maybe even later than that. And he comes back after giving this speech where he's like, it's been an honor serving the Nefeltari family, and then he shows back up and he's on crutches, and it was like, I'd have rather him just be like, I flew it out and dropped it off and then flew back so fast. Look at me, like, ascending with my powers. And some people try to write it off that, like, Zou and Devil Fruits are, like, real sturdy, and it's like, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that. Like, that explosion was supposed to look like it could have wiped out the entirety of Alabasta, and he's just walking it off. We also get Robin joining the Straw Hat crew. Can't have Frobin without Robin. All right, next up, we have Jaya, which I think I'm going to put at the top of B tier. I may put this at the bottom of A tier. You know what? No, I think I'm going to put it over the Baratie. I don't know, man. There's going to be a lot of switching around in this list, okay? As this develops, I'm going to try and not make it too top-heavy, because your boy's going to want to just start glazing everything from here on out. But Jaya is an incredible piece of the story of One Piece because of one specific thing being the introduction of Blackbeard, and how he and Luffy are two sides of the same coin. Not only is it the pie, but it's both of their understandings that the dreams of pirates will never die, but we can feel it in the story. We meet a lot of characters in the story of One Piece, but you can feel it. He gets special panels. He gets special double spreads where we see that this guy is different. This is somebody that we need to keep in the back of our mind. And as Blackbeard's mythology and story grows throughout the entirety of One Piece, it only serves to reinforce what we learned right at the beginning, is that he and Luffy are after the same thing, ultimate and total freedom. But Luffy needs to see that by having everyone around him and everybody be totally free, whereas Blackbeard's it's entirely self-serving. It is only for him. He wants the freedom that comes from being a celestial dragon or a king. And he may have higher aspirations by this point in the story with what he's already done on Egghead. That is a phenomenal setup. That is a great way to show that he is a character we need to understand and look at going forward. And it leads into maybe the most maligned story in all of One Piece, the most maligned arc. People, honestly, with their full chest say you can skip Skypiea? Are you kidding me? Skypiea is S tier. Skypiea is not only a phenomenal depiction of what happens to indigenous populations being taken over and run over completely by the white man who appoints himself as a god and as more valuable and as more willing for living than the people that he is overthrowing or harming or killing. But it shows that the relationship between, like, indigenous people can also be complex. It's not this the simple of invader versus the invaded. These people have complex stories that have been passed down along them as well, and that they have different understandings of the world based off of who they are. But that doesn't make them any less willing for a dignified existence. This also gives us the inclination that there was some planning early on for what Gear 5 would represent and what the sun god Nika would represent. And with current chapters of One Piece coming out right now as of May 10th, there's so many different little aspects within Skypiea that are leading to us having more understanding of the story now. And that's what makes it incredible. If you were a skip Skypiea person, I don't know, eat butts. And then we come careening off, right? We're going 110 miles an hour. We're throwing 12-6 sliders. We've got the guy down in an O2 count. He's sweating. And then we come in with an absolute meatball over the middle of the plate being Long Ring Longland. And look, there's fun aspects to Long Ring Longland. It's got a fun introduction. The main thing that holds Long Ring Longland back is that in the anime, they literally doubled the length of the arc to give them more time so that they didn't have to catch up too quickly, and they wanted to give themselves some more space from the actual manga. But those episodes sucked. Those episodes were terrible, in my opinion. Like, the second half leading into Afro Luffy, where they're playing games that are anime only, and they're doing, like, the roller skating rink, and, like, I could not stand some aspects of Long Ring Longland. It was the first time I felt like the story was really becoming a slog, and I'd rather read it so that I can read that quickly and then spend more time with arcs later on and really invest in that. You get through it. It's not too long, but it feels a lot longer than it actually is. The slow beam is awesome. In the hands of any other character, it's way too powerful. And then at the very end is when we start what is going to culminate in this, like, the very end of Long Ring Longland creates the moments that go from Water 7 to Enies Lobby to post Enies Lobby. This is now the formation of Robin's story and the idea of everybody deserves to live. Existence is not a crime, regardless of what the world government and Marines tell you. So, of course, rolling into maybe the 2 best arcs in all of One Piece, we're going to jump in and we're going to put Water 7 up at the top. I'm going to go ahead and put it in very first place. Water 7 is absolutely incredible. We have the conflict between Luffy and Usopp, and Luffy having to learn and understand what it means to actually be a captain, and the heartbreaking moment of him crying into his hat after beating Usopp, even though Usopp actually puts up a real fight, but Luffy is just too much of a demon. We have the loss of the Mary, how falling from Skypiea on a boat that's already kind of falling apart a little bit, splinters the section that runs down the middle, and then now it cannot possibly be repaired without just building a brand new ship. Which brings in Frankie and the Frankie family, and basically like the second walk where they go and beat up all those guys because they beat up on Usopp. We also get to gain more of an understanding of how the world government operates with Cypher Pole, and we get to meet the Galley Law crew, and we get to learn about how Tom was the shipbuilder for Goldie Roger and the Roger crew, and the risks that he had to take by doing that and creating the Sea Train. And so much of building this world of One Piece happens through these characters within Water 7 and Enies Lobby. We learn so much about this world in these 2 arcs, and then we get some of the best moments coming out of this, right? We meet T-Bone, and then also we have Mr. Prince, probably the best Sanji moments, and then we roll into Enies Lobby. We've got to go save Robin. We've got to get after it. Let's go ahead and put Enies Lobby up at the top right now. This is, as of the ones I've ranked, the best arc. I Want to Live, the fight with Rob Lucci, the fight with Bluno, where I feel like that's the last time that we've seen Luffy really just give someone the business. Like, that's one of my favorite moments in all of One Piece because Luffy holds nothing back. It's incredible to watch him just waste a guy. And then, of course, we also get Sniper King and the revelation of the Klabauterman with Frankie talking to Usopp and gaining a better understanding of who Frankie is, standing outside of the jail of Enies Lobby, ready to go to war for Robin. Sniper King, shoot down that flag. I could go on all day about the moments. And then, of course, it resolves in maybe the most emotionally impactful moment in all of the story of One Piece, being the Mary funeral. And I will tell you guys a real quick story. When I was watching the episodes leading up to the Mary funeral, my wife borrowed my car in order to park at like where I work. It was like free rather than having to pay for parking. And while she's on the way to go meet some of her friends, and she gets in an accident, and a guy runs a red light and basically runs straight into her, completely totals my car. This is my first car that I have ever paid off. I had this car for almost 11 years at this point in time. I had more than 100,000 miles on this. It was a Hyundai Veloster Turbo, a 2013 Hyundai Veloster Turbo. I've been through thick and thin with this car. Real thunderstorms, hands gripping the wheel. If we get through this, I'll never get rid of you. I made so many promises to that car. My wife comes home. We take her to the doctor. We go and we get the stuff out of my car. We come back, and the very first episode that comes on after all of that is the Mary funeral. I love the rest of One Piece. I love all of One Piece. Nothing will be as emotionally impactful as that moment. I think everybody kind of has one of those where One Piece was just so resonant in your life in that moment. That was my moment. That was the moment that I knew this is something I'm going to hold on to and like really like take care of, like my love for One Piece forever. Post Enies Lobby, I mean, we're just going to kind of throw it into C tier. This is a rounding off of what has happened so far in the story. We've gained an understanding as to how the world government operates and what they think of Luffy and his crew. We get new bounties. We get to see Garp, Kobe, and Helmeppo. And we're heading off to the next point in the story. Thriller Bark, I'm going to go ahead and throw at the top of B tier. Thriller Bark has some of the funniest moments in the entire story, like when Luffy pushes the zombie back into the ground. We also have some really great characters. I think Perona has been a fan favorite since her introduction and probably will be a fan favorite forever. We get to see a pretty cool moment where the gang tries to work together to make the Super Frankie or whatever whatever that like silly like formation they were gonna do, and Robin just said no, she's not gonna do it. We get Nightmare Luffy. We get a bit more understanding of who Sanji is, which is probably the most detrimental aspect to his character in the entire story. That might be the most detrimental moment, wanting the invis fruit so that he can sneak into bathrooms. And I know there's a lot of Sanji apologists who are going to try and say he actually wanted the invis fruit so he could disappear, which matches up with his backstory in Whole Cake Island. But that doesn't stop the fact that you have to live with the information of what is said in Thriller Bark for 400 episodes before you get to Whole Cake Island, and you can try and do some mental gymnastics as that's what he actually meant. We also get the introduction to my favorite non-Straw Hat character, that being Bartholomew Kuma. Kuma, at the end, when he's talking to Zoro, and he's saying he needs to take back his captain, and then, you know, Zoro's like, take my life, and he's like, I'll make a deal with you, let's go ahead and give you Luffy's pain. If you can withstand this, everything will be, we're square, we're clean. And seeing that, like, forgiveness, that willingness to kind of work with what we would perceive as the enemy at that point in time really gives you this inclination that Kuma has a lot more underneath. There's a lot more layers to Kuma than we thought there would be, or what we would understand would be. And he really shows that later in the story that, like, if you had faith that Kuma was going to mean a lot more as the story went on, like, he pays it off in spades. And to reiterate that point, as we head into an arc that I feel like a lot of people are very nostalgic for, which is going to be Sabaody. It feels like every time we get into a new arc, people are like, oh, this is a parallel to Sabaody. This is a parallel to Sabaody. This is the arc where the Straw Hats are going to get slapped down again. I think everyone kind of longs for that fear, that moment that there was something too great in this world for us to overcome. So the gang needs to figure out a new way to approach the world. They need to get better. In my opinion, we'll never see another truly Sabaody because we are actually a Yonko crew right now. I know a lot of the fan base is still tied to the Straw Hats being underdogs, but in my mind, like, we are at the point where they are a powerful, powerful crew. But that doesn't stop the fact that Sabaody is gut-wrenching. The Luffy, like, crying on the ground and, like, punching the ground in front of Kuma, I use that reaction like gif all the time because, like, it's stuck in my brain of, like, how haunting that felt in the moment, and not knowing what was going to happen when Kuma slapped people, and Kizaru showing up and just absolutely wasting the entire worst generation just when we felt like we really had some momentum coming out of Enies lobby, coming out of Thriller Bark. Like, it felt like we had, like, real sturdiness as a crew, and then there was a new level showed to us. We also got one of the greatest memes of all time that came out of this. It's so sad that Steve Jobs died from Ligma. Who the hell is Steve Jobs? Anyways, we have our bridge arc from Sabaody to Impel Down and Marineford being Amazon Lily, which I'll throw at the bottom of B tier. It is cool to see, again, more world building without it feeling like it's at the expense of the story. This is the story showing us that if this world is going to continue to be fleshed out, like, it's going to happen as the events unfold. And this is one of those moments where Oda really shines in building a world this way, and meeting an island that's exclusively full of women, and the idea of, like, Amazonians and their disdain and hatred for men, and Luffy, like, being presented with essentially, like, Sanji's dream of an island full of women, but just being completely indifferent to it and just wanting to go help Ace by the end of the arc, is a great way to reinforce who he is as a character, build this world, create some tension because he's so far away, and then set us up for a place that gets kind of brought back a few times in little moments throughout the rest of the story. But that leads us into one of the best arcs, being Impel Down. So we're going to put that, I absolutely love Impel Down because we get phenomenal Bon Clay moments. We get to meet so many of the terrifying characters. We get to reminisce with Blackbeard. Luffy and Blackbeard get face to face within this arc and truly understand that they are, again, two sides of the same coin. And Luffy sees this is the guy that turned in his brother. This is the guy that has put Ace essentially on the executioner's stand. Again, I can't rave enough about Bon Clay's moments and helping out Straw Boy. And then we get probably the all-time crocodile moment, like the best crocodile Sashi Burirana Mugiwara. Like, who doesn't love doing that? Like, it's so much fun. But then we get to jump into what I would say is the best war arc in the big three, and is probably one of the best war arcs of all time. But you really, it's kind of like, you know, when you look at like leaderboards and stuff for basketball stats, and it's like, oh, these 5 players have had like 40 point, 10 rebound games, and they've done it like 10 times, 8 times, 7, 7, 7. And then LeBron James is up here with like 45. That's Kingdom. Kingdom has more. There isn't a war arc in Kingdom that isn't better than all war arcs I've ever seen before. Okay, enough Kingdom glaze. This is the best war arc of the big three, and it is one of the best war arcs of all time. We get to be introduced to so many characters. We really actually get to see the apparatus of the Marines and of the Warlord system come together. And then now we get to meet we've met Shanks, and like Shanks is a Yonko, but now we get to meet like full-fledged fighting force. Hello, my name is Whitebeard, no scars on my back, blow half my face off, hole in my chest, people have stabbed me, doesn't matter, quake in the air. Like, we get some of the best moments in all of One Piece because of Whitebeard in this arc. And then we have the ultimate culmination in the moment where our main character understands he has to get stronger, being that Ace dies, that he couldn't save his brother. All right, and then we jump into 3D2Y, or post-war, which I'm just going to kind of put right behind post-Enies lobby. It's a nice moment. Ring the bell. We're moving into the next stage of this. This is the bridge from pre-time skip to post-time skip. This is when Luffy's going to have to learn how to actually utilize his haki. But really, the most impactful moment of this entire arc is Jinbei showing Luffy, hey, you may have just lost something, but there are people that still count on you. There are people that still believe in you. We got to lick our wounds, and we got to move forward. And then we get to Return to Sabaody, which is like, again, just a bridge arc to move into the new world. This is showing us that the Straw Hats have really elevated who they are. We get a good gag with the fake Straw Hat crew, and then like Chopper not realizing he's hanging out with the wrong people. We get some silliness from the gang, and we get to see the Thousand Sunny again. We get to see Kuma again defending the Thousand Sunny. We get to check in with Rayleigh one more time, and that all just again is another bridge arc. This is pushing us into the next aspect of the world, going to the new world and learning that, like, hey, everything behind you, that was paradise. All right, now I'm going to throw Fishman Island into A tier, just below Impel Down. I think Fishman Island, without the Sanji nosebleeds, is one of the best arcs in all of One Piece. And the anime pacing. The anime pacing in Fishman Island is pretty rough at a lot of different points in time, and like that's really exacerbated by the Sanji nosebleed stuff. But the concept that you have differing races, and there's obviously a group who feels that they are superior, and someone who is trying to radically change that system and feels that they are correct in using violence against the violence that is being done to them. And this complex scenario where they're also being enslaved, and then like the Fishmen are fighting against slavery, and we're seeing that the apparatus of the world government and the Marines are used to enable this entire aspect of what this world of One Piece kind of revolves around. And then you have kind of the altruistic nature of the royalty of the Fishman and trying to move into a more cohesive stage and move into a world where they can exist on the surface with people that are not Fishmen. This is a brilliant way to tell a story, especially resolving it with Jinbei donating blood to Luffy and showing that it may take time and it's going to take effort and there's going to be pain in the way, but we can find ways to be able to like actually get along with the surface world, and that the surface world is not entirely made up of the world government and Marines who are willing to enslave Fishmen and do the behest of the Celestial Dragons. That's a phenomenal story. Sanji nosebleeds the entire time is like by far the most annoying thing about it, and is really what holds it back. Like, that's the biggest thing in the manga. In the anime, I mean, like, the pacing plus that is, like, pretty bad. Punk Hazard, I'm going to put at the top of B tier. It's a really great arc. I am not a Law fanboy, so I'm not going to rank this super high because we spend a lot of time with Pookie. Like, Law to me reminds me of kids that would hang out outside of Hot Topic and wear Cookie Monster sweatpants to school. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. That's just all he makes me think of. Maybe because like he has like Surgeon of Death written on his fingers or like on his knuckles. Like that's so cheeky. He's such a poser. Like he's so like sweet and endearing, and he's just like acting like he's kid. Like we get introduced to him, kid, and when Luffy's hanging out with them on Sabaody, and we're supposed to think like he's the hard ass in this situation. No shot. But it is a good way to show that this world has now shifted. We are in a different paradigm because somebody like Smoker, who was a beast in pre-time skip, has now been entirely power clipped. He gets absolutely worked by Virgo. And we also have another Logia user being Caesar Clown being a massive problem. But this is the inclination. This is the start. This is the like we're going up the hill on the roller coaster for getting into the world of One Piece post time skip, and we are going to take on emperors. Not the goal of becoming an emperor, but taking down all 4 emperors. That was Luffy's initial goal. And we get to see the silly hijinks of Law makes a plan, Luffy does not care. We get into Dressrosa. Now, Dressrosa is an A-tier arc that I'd put above Fishman Island in the manga. In the anime, this is when the pacing really starts to slow down. If I remember correctly, there's episodes in Dressrosa that are less than a full chapter, which is absurd. That's ridiculous. Like, that should never happen in an anime, and some of the pacing was so bad. Some of the animation really gets, like, dulled down so that they can kind of, like, use their resources for the bigger moments. But there's so much to love about Dressrosa. The concept of power and might makes right really being at the forefront of losing, like, your dignified status, being, you know, Doflamingo with his family, and giving up being a celestial dragon and, like, the pursuit of, like, what you will do in order to seek those kinds of heights. And it's kind of like, what if Alabasta, what if Crocodile got away with it? And what if Crocodile was even more ruthless and even more terrifying? And then Kairos and Rebecca, we also have the Colosseum where we get to fight over the flame fruit. And then we also have the introduction of Sabo and the understanding that he wished he could have been there for Ace during Marineford, but he had lost his memories. And he didn't realize it until he saw that Ace had been executed. There is a lot to love about Dressrosa. I mean, Sugar's powers, Usopp actually standing up with the Tontada after almost not doing it, and then you have God Usopp, like, being hailed as a character. Luffy going Gear 4, Bounce Man. Doflamingo as a villain is just phenomenal, absolutely waxing Law to show that our guy is probably a little bit ahead of Law as a character in terms of strength. The stepping up of the crew, Fujitora, the birdcage, the intense moments, it's all culminates in a very fantastic scenery of an arc. And then you also have Fujitora apologizing to the Kingdom of Dressrosa because the world government and the Marines had failed them, completely, like, shifting the paradigm of, like, what it meant to be a Marine and going against what Sakazuki, Desk Admiral Sakabozo, looking out the window, I got to make sure to get lobster for the Celestial Dragons, Fleet Admiral, Akainu. Going against what his wishes were. Zou is kind of like this bridge point between the setup of Punk Hazard and Dressrosa, where we are still with the warlords, we are still on the smaller side of taking on these emperors, but Zou is how we're getting introduced to, we're going to have to break the gang up here, we're going to have to get after these emperors in some way, shape, or form, and don't worry, we're going to get there because there's beef already been created with a Yonko crew. There are people that are in hiding, and that this story is about to get quite a bit more complex. And I always thought the minks were really cool as well. But it's not too crazy. So I'm going to put it at the top of B tier. There's a lot to love about it. You get to meet Capone Beji, but we get to start the next aspect of the story with Sanji's backstory, Luffy talking about how he cannot become the Pirate King without him. We move into Whole Cake Island with this feeling of dread and like anxiety that like we're losing another crew member. Like the last time this happened was like a heartbreaking moment in Water 7. How is this going to shape out? It's just as heartbreaking. We learn more about Sanji's background, and I'd say we can put Whole Cake Island above Impel Down. Again, it's another pretty long arc with some pretty herky-jerky pacing. We have the fights in One Piece have never been JJK and Hunter x Hunter, where we just spend 5 chapters with one singular fight. But this is the most egregious example of like Oda showing one punch between Luffy and Dennis from SpongeBob and then going back to everything else that's happening. I know some people really love that way of storytelling for One Piece. For me personally, I do wish sometimes we just got the fight. I sometimes wish we just got like 5 chapters straight of Luffy taking a guy one-on-one. We've got some examples of that, like shorter stints recently with like big hockey blasts being kind of like the center of those big fights. I just wish the fight with Katakuri was a bit more cohesive because it was kind of like really spread out. It's over like 45 chapters if I remember correctly. But the introduction of Big Mom and seeing what a Yonko like crew looks like because she actually owns an island is a really neat way to see. Like we knew Yonko that traveled around, but they didn't necessarily like home base a certain place versus what we're going to see with Kaido and then what we also have with Big Mom, where it's like they actually have like a territory, like a place that they stick around at. The Reverie is more so like, I'm going to put this at the bottom of B tier. The Reverie is like a bridge to what happens after Wano. How the world government is shaping the world and the interactions that are happening there, and seeing how Sabo is perceived by the rest of the world, the break into Marijois, as well as the meetings that are happening between all the people at the Reverie, and then also just kind of reinforcing that like it doesn't matter to the world government what the fishmen do. They will always be seen as an underclass because like their princess was almost purchased and sold off. And like Cypherpole like steps in to try and help facilitate this. Like that's how egregious these characters and this world actually is. And then Wano, for me, I'd probably have Wano as an S tier. Now, if you ask people that didn't binge Wano, if you ask people that read it weekly, they seem to have a lot of issues with it. To me, Wano and Onigashima should be seen as 2 different arcs, but that's just my opinion. But Wano is this culmination of all of these different aspects of the world of One Piece, and then Oda getting to do a Japan island and having the time-traveling story and the background of Odin, and seeing what Goldie Roger was like and what young Whitebeard was like, and seeing what that journey to find the One Piece was, and the he laughed moment is so good. And then we get the raid on Onigashima with some of the greatest moments in anime history. I mean, is it episode 10-15 is the one that One Piece skips, but it's the one where like we go through all like the colorful expansion and it's Yamato and we get to meet some incredible characters. Wano also has probably the most egregious, like that guy actually died. I mentioned it earlier with Ashura Doji. Like it's, why was that a thing? I never understood that part. But the Onigashima raid is phenomenal, and the characters of Wano are incredible, and the imagery, the mythology, the stories, the characterization, and the setting, and the like clothing, literally, like the style of the characters is all so good within Wano. Lastly, we're going to do Egghead. I'm also going to throw Egghead in S tier. I mean, it's one of the best lore piece arcs in all of One Piece. I mean, like, it's so much information is told to us by Vegapunk. We gain a much better understanding of what Luffy actually is as the sun god, as the wielder of the Gum Gum fruit. The lore of Egghead is absolutely incredible, and we get to see the culmination of should I or could I with what you have with Vegapunk and working for the world government and understanding that his machinations will be used for evil, but he still has the desire to create and try and shape the world into a better place through the world government, even though they've basically taken his inventions and turned them into the most evil thing that they possibly can. and like it's a heartbreaking story for him. And then you also have the best backstory in all of One Piece being Kuma. Again, the best non-Straw Hat character in the entire story. He's so good. And I truly believe, my theory is that from whispered prayers, the sun god rose. Kuma's prayers during his backstory are what leads to the Gum Gum fruit selecting Luffy and calling to Luffy to eat it. Again, it's a theory. None of that's confirmed, but that's what I like to believe. Even if Oda refutes it, I'm believing it. I don't care. Anyways, we get to also meet the Gorosei and actually see what we're up against for the rest of the world, and then we get to move on to that island, being Elbaf. If I had to throw G8 on here, being it's a filler arc within the anime only, even though I actually really like it. I think G8 is really, really good. I would probably throw it in, like, middle of B tier. Like, I think it's an enjoyable arc, and I think it's a fun one. Anyways, if you like the rankings, if you don't like the rankings, doesn't matter. Hit subscribe, like, comment, hit the bell if you want to see more from me, and I hope to see you guys next time.